Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Wednesday, March 11th, 2026. Undocumented Motherhood, Chapter 3. What sickness? Right now, I am sick. I have a sickness que ya no se quita. It's a sickness in my bones. I get sudden pains in my joints. Some days it's worse than others. But the pain is always there, despite that I still get up at 5 in the morning and make lunch for my daughters, bathe them, and take them to school. Everything, a lot of times, I just have to do it. All like that, with that pain and everything. And my mind, for example, has to say, ¿Cuál enfermedad? What sickness? Because I have obligations. I had to push Claudia to talk about her own health. I had to keep prepping her, reminding her I was going to ask about it. It wasn't the first question I asked because it couldn't be. I learned this in conversations with our mothers. First, I had to give Claudia the time and space to tell me everything that was most important to her, and that was her children. Only after she had the chance to talk about her struggles to find care for Nati was Claudia ready to even approach the subject of her own health. And even then, the story was much shorter, truncated, and interrupted by what Claudia said was forgetfulness. It was a new day. Claudia and I were on a different couch. In the little time that had passed since our last conversation, her family had moved. The new house wasn't far from their previous home. Nati was still at the same school, but Claudia was excited about two significant differences in her new space. Her previous home was a 2-bedroom apartment in a small complex with maybe only 5 other units. There was a shared outdoor space that Claudia utilized well, despite the size. I remember it being carefully set up with 4 long tables decorated with a colorful centerpieces from the Trolls movie. There was a bouncy house on one end of the yard and a taco station on the other. It was Nati's birthday, and I remember being excited that Claudia was as passionate about birthday parties as I am. Going all out for a birthday felt very Mexican to me because that's how I grew up. I felt a connection. Claudia's new home was much bigger. It was a house with a lot more land. They had large front and backyards where Claudia had already set up hammocks and toys for her girls to play and enjoy the space. She was excited to show me all of the details of her new home. Claudia boasted about how spacious and bright the inside of her house was. Natural light in a home is very important to me too, so I understood her excitement. We talked a while about the move and how things weren't completely in their place. But everything was new and exciting. Normal new house, moving stuff. I was happy for Claudia, even though she emphasized the joy the space would bring to her girls. I could tell it was also a ray of hope for her. We settled into the new couch in the large, bright room, the baby quietly watching cartoons in the other room. One day, the pain was so strong, Claudia went on. It was so bad I had to make my husband take a day off work to take care of the girls so I could go cure myself. It wasn't too long ago, maybe a few months ago, I was making tortillas, and the pain hit me hard in the lower part of my body. So then, he didn't go to work because I couldn't even stand up. I couldn't stand. My stomach was swollen and my whole lower part got really bad. So yes, I'm a little sick, but I stay silent because I don't have anyone to take care of my daughters. Especially the little one, or because we don't have money, I have obligations. Y no puedo ir, I can't go. Y así, verdad. The sickness in my bones is it's called fibromyalgia, I asked. Yes, something like that. They just discovered it. I had it 5 months ago. I went to the doctors because I didn't feel well. I felt really bad. I would get a lot of fevers. And I had so much pain in my bones. I would get chills, and I just couldn't stand it. My head would hurt so bad. I would get hit with the pain here, and then this whole side of my body would hurt. Pues sí me sentía muy mal. I had been feeling that way for a long time. So one day I just said no, no more. I was driving and the headache hit me and I felt dizzy like I wanted to vomit and pass out. So that was when I went to the doctor and told him everything I was feeling. The doctor gave me some medicine, and at first it helped control the pain. And I thought, okay, now I feel better. But with my body wouldn't just receive the treatment. The medicine would make me shake a lot. And it makes me nauseous and gives me headaches. I don't like taking it because it would make me speak incoherently. It's like it drugs me up too much, muy feo, because of the pain. So I stopped taking it for a couple weeks, but then the pain came back again. So I had to go back at it. I started taking it at night, just one time. And it helped for a little while, but now I've noticed that it stopped working. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, common symptoms of fibromyalgia are pain and stiffness all over the body, headaches and migraines, fatigue, tingling or numbness, digestive issues, depression, and anxiety. Claudia recalled that she had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia only a few months before our conversation. It made me wonder how long she may have been dealing with the symptoms. How long she'd gone undiagnosed. And how fibromyalgia may have affected her mothering in the months after she first arrived in the United States. As I did more research on the illness, I read that there weren't really any definitive answers as to what might cause fibromyalgia, but there are some theories and associations. Most of the publications I read concluded that symptoms of fibromyalgia ought to begin after a traumatic physical or psychological experience, and women are more likely to develop it. I thought back to Claudia's migration story, the desperation she felt to leave, fleeing everything and everyone she knew, the multiple failed attempts to cross the river, and the fear of drowning. All the time she had to say goodbye to Nati and leave her with coyotes, the fear of what might happen and of possibly never seeing her daughter again, the guilt of putting her in the care of strangers. I thought about Claudia's body was shoved into the roof fairing of an 18-wheeler truck, the terror she felt when she was caught and left in the desert with a strange man, and then threatened with death and rape by the people who were supposed to get her safely across the border. I thought about her being caught by immigration and thrown in a detention center, the fear of being erased, of having no way to contact her family and call for help, the extreme cold and humiliation of not having the privacy to fulfill basic human needs, such as using the bathroom. Not even after all that, she kept trying to cross. She had to for Nati. I thought about how Claudia was stuffed inside of another truck with dozens of other people who she didn't know, mostly men, crammed in like sardines. How she had to listen to a woman being raped and waiting hard to see if she would be next. How she had to try as hard as she could to be quiet and invisible so she wouldn't be caught by immigration, and so she wouldn't stand out with the men. I thought about her walking across the desert in the middle of the night, stepping over cadavers and snakes, terrified of lagging and getting separated from the group, her feet destroyed, bleeding and blistered. exhausted and barely able to walk. Yes, I thought to myself, that sounds like a pretty traumatic physical and psychological experience, or rather experiences, multiple, repeated, concentrated. The body records trauma. The collateral damage of migration, the shock, was forever carved into Claudia's body. I think about how it would feel to have anything carved into my body. Of course it would hurt, but would the pain linger and vibrate for days, years? Would I feel the pain deep in my bones, in my joints, the parts of my body that would stitch me together and make me whole? Would I get migraines and get so overwhelmed by the pain that I would fall into deep despair, into depression? I don't think Claudia made the connection between her fibromyalgia symptoms and her migration. When I asked her if she ever thought about it, she seemed surprised at first, then pensive, like, maybe it makes sense. Pero quién sabe, verdad? She asked as though a connection had been made, but it was all too much to think about. Another word for trauma can be susto. My grandmother took susto very seriously. She taught me that when you experience a traumatic event, your spirit is jolted out of your body, frightened away, leaving you disoriented and vulnerable. If you don't take care to recover your frightened spirit, your body remains defenseless, open, and more susceptible to additional harm, including illness. Over and over, Claudia referred to her migration story as horrible. Muy feo. I think she understood that it was a traumatizing experience. But from what she shared with me, she hadn't named the trauma, the susto, or taken the time to begin healing her spirit, to call it back to her body. Claudia couldn't really say how long she'd experienced the symptoms of fibromyalgia, but she was sure it started after she migrated to the United States. I thought about her revelation of feeling overwhelmed and hopeless as Nati's mother and sole caregiver. Seemingly desperate parts of her story were beginning to connect. The physical body of trauma was forming like a puzzle, coming into view with each intangible piece. For years, Claudia had been suffering from the symptoms of fibromyalgia, feeling chronic and invasive pain all over her body, while also fighting with doctors to obtain care for her daughter, worrying how she might pay for everything and being tortured by migraines, nausea, and dizziness. But despite everything, she was also learning how to mother a strong and independent daughter with a hearing disability, and learning how to adapt and to align with all the demands of North American life, including learning English and American Sign Language, and teaching her daughters both of those as well as Spanish, dealing with teachers and physicians who questioned her motherhood because of the language she spoke or didn't speak, while also being undocumented and feeling burdened by the numerous barriers and threats she faced, just giving her children to the doctor. It's more than most of us could handle. It's enough to make the physical body crash and scream for help. Fibromyalgia was Claudia's body screaming for help, begging her to stop and heal, begging someone to help her stop and heal. Fibromyalgia literally knocked Claudia off her feet. It made it impossible for her to do anything, even walk. It made her, for the first time, demand that her husband help her. Illness is the body communicating to us, everyone around us, that something is wrong. And we need to listen. Sometimes the body whispers, but other times it shouts, because everything else is noisy, and demanding the body must be louder, especially for women. It makes sense to me, given all the demands and pressures of women. And mothers, that women are more likely to get an illness characterized by chronic generalized pain all over the body. It makes sense, given how uncompromising the demands on women are, that women would be more likely to get an illness that makes their bodies cry in pain and shut down in protest. I wonder how many undocumented immigrant women might be suffering from undiagnosed fibromyalgia, how many might suffer from depression and anxiety caused by fibromyalgia. Biomedicine doesn't know the exact cause of the disease, because there isn't just the one cause located in the material body. It can't be dissected out of a person and biopsied. It doesn't fit under a microscope or in a test tube. We may never know how many undocumented Latinas suffer from fibromyalgia or other stress-induced illness, but from the strain and complexity of an undocumented life compounded by gender demands, chronic pain and stigma of an invisible illness, screaming but unheard. My whole body hurts, todo, Claudia went on, but I don't think the doctor is helping. Sometimes I don't think they believe me, or they think I'm just in my head. He hasn't told me to stop eating anything or given me any other solutions. He just tells me to exercise a lot. So I go and exercise every day, but I have to wear knee braces because my knees hurt so much. I mostly just go to Zumba, but here at the house when I'm home with my girls, I do some things too. My husband bought me some cositas so that I could also do some exercises here in the house whenever I could. Se siente feo, sabes? The pain is the worst. The pain in my hips and in my knees. That's what I feel most often. The pain in those parts of my body. Sometimes in all over. I can't even say where, in my shoulders here and there. In my fingers of my hand here all over. It feels awful. It's awful because you're just standing, just standing there and boom, all of a sudden, se te afloja el pie, your foot gives out. And it hurts you. It hurts you. Or you want to walk. There are times that I kneel and I don't get up anymore because I can't. And I'm not good at kneeling because then I have to crawl over to something I can grab onto in order to bring myself back up. Because my knees and hips hurt so much. Entonces se siente feo estar así. The medicines the doctor gives me are for the pains. I take them every day. All of this is for life now, por vida. 2 weeks ago, I went back to the doctor, right, because the pills weren't working anymore. So he had to prescribe me a much, much stronger medication. I have to take them, but I don't like to take them because they're so strong that they are hitting me hard, and I know that I will get used to them. And then one day they will stop working, and then there won't be any other pills that will help because that was the limit. None. So I really didn't want a stronger dose. But they had to increase it because I felt the same. Pain, dizziness, y pa allá, y pa acá. Y a mí la tuvieron que subir. I have no choice but to take them because if I don't take them, for sure, I will be in constant pain. Everything. And if I stop taking it 1 or 2 days, I will start back again with the shaking fever pain. Y pa allá, y pa acá. That is why I have to take them every day, every night, because in the morning I forget everything, but at night for sure I remember to take them. If not, I carry them in my purse, and I also carry Tylenol, just in case I can't stand the pain. Or if I get hit with sudden pains, then I take a Tylenol. As I was listening to Claudia, I was thinking about how hard she was trying to feel better. There wasn't any room in her day for chronic pain. She had too much to do. I felt a pull in my gut imagining Claudia crawling around a room alone in pain, trying to pull herself up. Her concern that the doctors didn't believe her pain, that they might think it's all in her head, wasn't at all far-fetched. There was a long history of women's pain being dismissed or ignored by doctors, and doctors rejecting women's complaints of physical pain and attributing their symptoms to psychosis, hysteria. Instead, gender bias in medicine, like racial bias, doesn't look like a doctor calling a woman hysterical and sending her home. It can look like a woman pleading that she's in unbearable physical pain, that her knees ache, and the doctor is telling her to exercise more. There are other factors that would also render Claudia's pain invisible to U.S. doctors. Her comment that the doctor just insisted that she needed to exercise more kept replaying in my mind. I couldn't shake the connections. In my research, I had found more than a few instances of doctors pushing uninsured Latina patients to be more responsible for their own health, feeding them particularly paternalistic formula of do better, individualism, and acute personal responsibility that had become common in healthcare. But that always seemed to be especially cocked, loaded, and ready to shoot at the working poor and uninsured patients of color. Besides the multiple biases in her medical encounters, Claudia was also experiencing the stigma of having a chronic illness that wasn't physically evident, of feeling pain that altered her state of being and limiting her functioning, but that nobody could see or understand. Se siente feo, Claudia said over and over, liking the words to describe the depth of her suffering. I also lack the words, and society lacks words and sympathy for these kinds of experiences. People like Claudia might get an initial recognition for their suffering, but after a while, with no proof of disability, that sympathy withers away in the face of the demands of the day. The demands of normalcy. The children have to be cared for. The food has to be made. The house has to be cleaned. And Claudia has to do it. Period. Es por vida, Claudia lamented. She would have to struggle with the debilitating symptoms of fibromyalgia every day for the rest of her life, performing normalcy to get through the day, and all she had were painkillers and Zumba. Cancers, tumors, malignant growths in the body, in the uterus. If as many women feel in La Matriz is the source of womanhood and motherhood, but it keeps getting attacked by cancer, what does that say about the traumas that Latinas, Mexicanas carry? The struggles and sustos that end our life-giving source into bloody shock. I wonder how many undocumented and uninsured Latinas are living with uterine diseases. How many are living with undiagnosed cervical cancer? How many will die from untreated cervical cancer, bleed out from random hemorrhage, or have an unexpected heart attack from undiagnosed anemia? How many undocumented and uninsured Latinas will get preventable cervical cancer because they don't have humane access to health care? A simple search on the internet responds dispassionately to my question in the first dozen headlines. Hispanic women less likely to survive endometrial uterine cancer. The crisis of cervical cancer among Latinas. Medical reports shouting death sentences in bold uppercase titles. I asked Claudia how she felt about her medical exclusion and the limited access for her and her daughter. I asked her what she thought about the xenophobic discourse she heard in the media and all the negative things that were being said about immigrants. Mal, muy mal, she responded. And sometimes I get scared because in the first place, I never wanted to come over here. Never, ever. Never was it in my plans to come here and be undocumented, illegal, or whatever they want to call us. But I do get scared because I see how much progress my girl has made here. So I worry about her more than anything else, right? She has progressed so much here. So much, so much. Her more than anyone else. I know that here she can have una carrera chiquita. A little career. She can be an interpreter. She can maybe even be a teacher or an assistant or something like that, right? So, well, here I see more of a future than for her in Mexico, where I lived and where there is nothing for her. So I do get scared. I get scared that the laws are changing and getting stricter, and that they say that the police now are going to work with immigration, now that they approved SB 4. All I can do is pray. If they were to catch me, now they would take me back to the detention center. Then they would give me a 10-year deportation. In other words, they increased the punishment. Once I have the 10-year deportation, if I were to come back into the U.S. and get caught, then I could possibly go to jail for up to a year. It's really complicated, pero pues sí. Si me llegaron a aventar, then I wouldn't come back. But if they ever take me, I want them to take me with my girls. So yes, I do get scared. I do. Because of all of that. But until now, in these years that I have been here, I have not been stopped for anything, not even a ticket. Nothing. I drive well. I am very careful when I drive. I drive the limit and everything. These days, I am more scared to leave the house. I wasn't as much before, but now, yes, I am. Before, I would go out to the stores, not to buy anything, right, but just to see. I would go out with my sisters-in-law in the street, driving back and forth. But now I don't go out at all. I don't go anywhere. I just go from the house to the school and from the school back to the house. Ever since the SB4 law went into effect. Because before I was out and about. But now with SB4, no, not anymore. I just stay here every day. At night when my husband gets home, then we go to the grocery store if we need to. But otherwise, we don't really go out. Sometime after our conversations together, I invited Claudia to a birthday party in my home. She had invited us to Nathy's birthday previously, and I wanted to reciprocate the invitation. It took Claudia some time to respond, so I wasn't sure that she was going to come. When I saw her at school one day, she told me that she was waiting to hear from her comadre Beatriz to see if she was going too. At first I thought maybe Claudia was just reluctant to come because she was worried that she wouldn't know anyone there. I had also invited Beatriz because her daughter was a good friend of my son's. But Claudia wasn't feeling anxious about the party. That wasn't why she was waiting on Beatrice to respond first. It was because I live on the other side of town, about 30 minutes away farther than Claudia, and her family were comfortable. Although I also valued Beatrice's company, after that time, anytime I invited Claudia to my home, I made sure to also invite Beatrice. I made sure they were a package deal, their closeness marked by deep friendship and trust. This experience, however, highlighted for me the invasiveness of Claudia's undocumented status, how it seeped and spilled into every corner and crevice of her life. How many times had I taken my children to birthday parties in any given month or year? Once, twice, 5 times, 10 times? My mind would usually be preoccupied with all the things I had to do to prepare for the party. Gifts, wrapping, bows, gift cards. Did I remember to RSVP and map the directions? But what I wasn't thinking was, what if I get pulled over by a cop? And deported while I was driving to this party. What if they detain me, take my children, and I never see my family again? No, I've never had that fear while driving to a birthday party or anywhere, and chances are, unless you're undocumented, neither have you. For Claudia, this fear isn't as an anxious thought, a worst-case scenario drummed up in her brain. It's a very real possibility. Not only can it happen, but it has happened many times to many families. Family separation. Is a new American slogan. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, and we'll separate them. We'll separate their families and disappear them into detention centers or across borders they may not know. Thousands of mothers like Claudia are tormented by the thought of potentially driving to a birthday party or a doctor's appointment and never coming home. I thought to other undocumented mothers I've spoken with. One thing that stood out in all their stories was that they felt the most afraid when they were traveling somewhere. In El Camino, they emphasized almost in unison. It was the trip from one place to another that these women felt the most fear, in the obscure in-between spaces of travel in the journey. And as before, had only intensified that fear. For Claudia, every excursion outside her home, even to the store, was a replay of her migration, with every trip bringing back memories of the border and the fear of having to face it all again. Later, I found out that Claudia and her husband had already had a very close call.